It's a scenario that no one wants to imagine. Yet, it's a possibility that we cannot ignore. What would happen if World War III began tomorrow? In this video, we will explore the catastrophic consequences of a global conflict that could threaten the very existence of humanity. Welcome to Rash 360, where you'll be amazed and mesmerized with interesting content while simultaneously gaining useful information. Phase 1. A week before the onset of World War III, tensions are already high in the region as China initiates a military exercise near the Taiwan Strait. However, the American intelligence satellites detect a large number of Chinese military hardware being prepared for the possible invasion of Taiwan. This revelation puts American military on high alert in remote areas such as Guam and Hawaii, knowing the potential of situation escalating to a full-blown conflict. Taiwan, too, is not taking any chances and starts to take defensive positions in anticipation of an attack. The island nation is already living with constant threat of invasion from China, and the latest military exercise by Beijing has only added to its anxiety. The world watches as tensions rise, with experts fearing that any misstep by either side could trigger a catastrophic war. If China does indeed launch an invasion of Taiwan, the United States makes it clear that it will provide its full support to the island nation and starts to prepare its forces for the possibility of being deployed to the region to defend Taiwan against any Chinese aggression. Phase 2. A barrage of missiles has just been launched from Chinese air bases headed to destroy US bases to the south. The US detects the incoming missiles and immediately retaliates by launching their own missiles to intercept the attack. The missiles have been launched at same time and so they meet in mid-air. The resulting explosion is catastrophic, sending debris flying in all directions. It is the first time in history that two nuclear powers have fought each other, launching missiles at the same time. The US has just fired its last shot, having destroyed many of China's missiles. But Chinese missiles are a lot to intercept, and therefore many managed to pass through, resulting in massive destruction that has caused many of American air bases to temporarily fall out of commission in the region. As the smoke clears from the devastating missile exchange, China declares war on Taiwan, signaling the beginning of the Phase 2 of World War III. In the Taiwan Strait, Chinese naval forces begin to mobilize their battleships, and submarines have been loaded with thousands of troops and military hardware. The sea is alive with the sound of naval engines as the China sends a clear message of its intentions to invade Taiwan. The defending forces on Taiwan are fully aware of what is coming and having already taken up their defensive positions. However, they are outnumbered and outgunned by incoming Chinese forces. The Chinese Navy hunts down any signs of resistance, determined to overwhelm and conquer the island nation. As Chinese naval forces approach the shores of Taiwan, the island nation is ready to defend itself with every ounce of strength it possesses. Its beaches are fortified with defensive positions, while Taiwanese and American submarines lie beneath the ocean's surface, ready to strike at any moment. Any aggressive move by People's Liberation Army will be met with fierce resistance as the Taiwanese military stands ready to defend its people and its land. As second wave of Chinese missile hurtles towards Taiwan and American air bases, the situation becomes even more dire. The Taiwanese military defenses are put to ultimate test as they attempt to intercept the incoming missiles with their anti-aircraft batteries. The air is thick with the sound of missiles being launched, anti-aircraft gun firing, and screams of explosions as two sides engage in a deadly dance of destruction. China's primary target is to disable Taiwan's radars, military posts, and any other strategic locations that could pose a threat to their mission of capturing the island nation. At the same time, they want to keep the US air bases out of commission, leaving the American forces weakened and unable to mount a full-scale attack. As the Chinese forces inch closer to Taiwan, The island's nation's military is bracing itself for the deadliest battle it has ever faced. The fate of Taiwan hangs in the balance as its defending forces engage in a fierce battle against invading Chinese army. The American forces are also actively involved in the conflict, but they are yet to bring their full firepower to the war. Meanwhile, Japan, South Korea and the Philippines are left with a difficult decision to make. China has attacked US bases situated in their homeland, and they cannot ignore such a blatant act of aggression. The three nations are faced with the choice of either joining the fight against China or risking the wrath of the Chinese military. The world holds its breath as the deadliest battle in the history looms, with the fate of Taiwan hanging in the balance and the possibility of wider conflict involving multiple nations looming on the horizon. Phase 3. As the Chinese Navy closes in on Taiwan's shores, the island's silent but deadly submarines are brought to life. In a swift and coordinated strike, the submarines launch their torpedoes, unleashing a deadly payload on the incoming People's Liberation Army fleet. The resulting explosions rip through the water, sending shockwaves in all directions and causing chaos among Chinese forces, resulting in scream of panic through the waters as many of Chinese subs and ships are destroyed, leaving hundreds of troops dead in the water. The element of surprise and precise targeting by the Taiwanese submarines proved to be a game changer, dealing a significant blow to Chinese naval forces and giving Taiwan a much needed advantage in the conflict. As the Chinese Navy recovers from the surprise attack, they quickly scramble to launch their own counterattack. Their ships and planes surround the area where US and Taiwanese subs are located and begin firing torpedoes and missiles into the water. The US and Taiwanese subs fight back fiercely, launching their own counterattacks and dodging the incoming fire. However, despite their best efforts, a few of their subs are hit and disabled, forcing them to retreat back to their respective base. As the smoke clears, both sides assess the damage. Chinese Navy has suffered significant losses, but they have managed to defend their territorial waters and push back the enemy. The US and Taiwan have lost a few valuable subs, but they have also demonstrated their mighty military and strategic prowess. With tensions rising and the threat of further escalation looming, it remains to be seen how this conflict will play out. As the Chinese military advances through the shores of Taiwan, they are met with a barrage of sea mines, which cripples their valuable assets. Meanwhile, the Taiwanese forces, fortified and prepared for the invasion, put up a heavy resistance against the enemy forces. The Allied forces declare their full support for the US in defending Taiwan against Chinese invasion. Japan and the Philippines in particular pledged their support, having suffered casualties from the Chinese missiles that struck their homelands. However, not all countries stand in solidarity with the US-led alliance. As China's ally, Russia supports their invasion, while South Korea remains on high alert for possible aggression from North Korea. To further complicate matters, the Indian naval forces, being an ally to the United States, have mobilized to block Chinese trade routes, putting China's supply lines in jeopardy. The pressure mounts on China as they struggle to sustain a long-term conflict with their supply lines cut off. The situation becomes increasingly precarious as US and its allies prepare for an all-out war with China, leading to a potentially catastrophic outcome. As the Chinese attack helicopters and fighter jets breached Taiwan's airspace, they flew low under the radar to avoid detection. They began unleashing a barrage of missiles and bombs targeting key defense formations, hoping to cripple Taiwan's ability to resist the invasion. But they soon found out that the Taiwanese defense had been well prepared for this eventuality. Advanced surface-to-air missile systems, that is SAM systems, provided by the US were put to work, making it difficult for the Chinese to approach their targets. The Taiwanese troops on the ground were equally prepared, and they fought with fierce determination, using every weapon into their arsenal to repel the invaders. But Chinese forces were relentless, and the battle raged on. China suffered huge loss, but they continued to press forward, determined to secure a foothold on Taiwanese soil. As the conflict escalated, Japan and Philippines provided vital logistical support to the Taiwanese forces. The Chinese troops were outnumbered and outgunned, but they continued to fight, their air force launching wave after wave of attacks. The Taiwanese air force was valiantly holding its ground, preventing the Chinese from gaining air superiority. However, the Taiwanese forces were forced to operate through highways and public infrastructure as many of their military posts and bases were reduced to smoldering ruins. Finally, the first Chinese soldier set foot on Taiwanese soil, but he was met with a hail of gunfire from Taiwanese combatants. The resistance was fierce and the Chinese forces suffered heavy casualties. The war had just begun, and it was shaping up to be a long and bloody conflict. The situation is grim as both sides continue to suffer heavy losses. Despite the fierce resistance from the Taiwanese military, the Chinese have managed to make their way onto the island's beaches. The battle has already claimed thousands of lives on both sides, and there seems to be no end in sight. This is the first time since World War II that such a catastrophic scenario has unfolded, with two superpowers engaged in a full-scale conflict. Amidst the international pressure of trade blockade and oil supply cutoff, China is desperately trying to seize Taiwan. Despite facing heavy losses, the Chinese forces have managed to advance towards the Taiwanese city with their tanks and convoys. The battlefield is strewn with thousands of fallen Taiwanese soldiers as China pushes forward in a bid to take control of the city and gain more ground. The Chinese military unleashes its fury upon Taiwanese airspace, deploying scores of advanced fighter jets and attack helicopters to wreak havoc on the island's key infrastructure and strategic locations. The air is filled with deafening roar of engines as the aircraft fly low and fast, dodging incoming anti-aircraft fire from Taiwanese defenses. Despite the formidable resistance, Chinese forces managed to inflict heavy damage on targets ranging from power plants and communication networks to airfields and naval bases. Suddenly, the Chinese radar installations detect a small radar signature of stealth aircraft for a few seconds before it disappears. Moments later, sky above the Chinese coast is filled with thousands of smart guided bombs, raining down the Chinese radar installations and major supply hubs. The China's ability to monitor the South China Sea is now severely limited. It was none other than the latest American B-21 stealth bombers that were launched as soon as US detected the missile launch by China. The US forces have now arrived with their stealth bombers paving the way for the main force to arrive in support of Taiwanese territory. The Chinese fighters were caught off guard when the multiple missile lock warnings set off alarms in their cockpits. They quickly kicked their afterburners into high gear, trying to outrun incoming missiles. But Chinese 4th generation fighters were no match for the advanced air-to-air missiles of US forces which had arrived to support Taiwan. The F-35 stealth fighters, followed by F-22 Raptors and F-16 Falcons, swooped in with precision-guided munitions, leaving behind a trail of destruction. These were the world's most advanced sky-conquering birds, and they were on a mission to protect their allies. As the Chinese Air Force crumbled under the relentless assault, multiple US naval strike groups arrived to defend the island nation, but China was not about to give up that easily. They launched missiles at multiple strike groups of US Navy present in the region, hoping to gain an edge in the battle. But the US forces detected the launch of missiles at an early stage and launched countermeasures to avoid as many missiles as possible from striking target coordinates. Despite their efforts, many missiles still managed to find their targets. However, the US naval fleet had a trick up their sleeve. They started moving randomly in fast, erratic motion, taking sharp turns to avoid as many missile hits as possible. It was a daring move that paid off. Most of the missiles missed their intended targets, and US forces managed to to withstand the attack. Despite their advanced technology, the US Navy suffered heavy losses from Chinese missile strike. Several naval ships were hit and badly damaged, and many sailors lost their lives. However, the US forces were not deterred and continued to fight on. The battle for Taiwan had escalated to new heights, with both sides determined to emerge victorious. But for now, the US forces had gained the upper hand, and China was left stunned and reeling from the devastating blow. In a bold move, the United States has launched a devastating cyber attack on China, penetrating their impenetrable Great Firewall and unleashing a torrent of revelations about China's devastating losses in the ongoing conflict. This brazen attack has ignited a fierce reaction from Chinese people who have fed a dangerous lie by their own government that the invasion of Taiwan would be a cakewalk. Now the truth comes to the light. The Chinese population is slowly but surely turning against their own leaders, with the very real possibility of a violent uprising and civil war on the horizon. Tensions are on the rise as Russia mobilizes their troops and military equipment to the border of Ukraine, Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia. This aggressive move is seen as a calculated attempt to escalate tensions in NATO region. After all, the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine has already inflicted a heavy damage on Russia. Phase 4. The world trembles as US unleashes a full-scale attack on China, sending their most advanced fighter jets from a nearby airspace and warships to regain control of Taiwan. The Taiwanese airspace is a deadly battlefield. The assault is led by stealthy F-22s and F-35s, launching a new generation long-range air-to-air missiles on Chinese jets, with backup from 4th generation US fighter aircrafts joining the fray alongside. The 4th generation jets in China's arsenal prove no match for the might of the American military. The American firepower is overwhelming. For every single American aircraft shot down, 4 Chinese ones go down. But the US isn't content with just dominating the air. They ruthlessly destroy China's naval fleet in the Taiwan Strait, leaving most of them either sunk or unable to fight. The Chinese military is reeling from the losses, struggling to keep up with the pace of the American assault. And as if that wasn't enough, NATO forces at Russian border are preparing for its first response team in case Russia tries to invade NATO territory. Despite the steep losses suffered by the US, China's losses are far greater. Their supply routes have been effectively blocked by Indian and US navies, leading to a severe shortage of energy and skyrocketing of prices. With their backs against the wall, the Chinese government knows that capturing Taiwan is now more important than ever. But the war has taken a heavy toll on the population and the people are growing restless. Will China be able to end the conflict before it spirals out of control? The battlefield was in chaos as China launched their latest weaponry, including the state-of-art 5th generation aircraft. They also launched their advanced missile systems and high-tech drones. The US forces were caught off guard and suffered severe losses, but they continued to defend the Taiwan with all their might. The conflict had reached its boiling point, and the tension between the two nations was at an all-time high. As China's defeat became more likely, their government faced a new challenge. Civil unrest was brewing at home, and international sanctions were crippling their economy. They were losing ground in Taiwan, and their options were running out. The only solution left was to use the dreaded weapon of mass destruction. But the consequences of such an action would be catastrophic for both China and the world. With the fate of Taiwan and the entire world at stake, the leaders of both nations faced a difficult decision. Would they continue to fight until the bitter end, or would they choose a path of peace and diplomacy? The clock was ticking, and the world watched in anticipation as the two superpowers stood on the brink of a destruction. The streets of Beijing were ablaze with riots as people cried out for justice. The government's iron grip on the country had finally slipped, and the citizens were now taking matters in their own hands. The civil war was in full swing, and the might of Chinese army seemed to be dwindling with each passing day. But the government was not ready to give up without a fight. As their forces struggled to hold off the rebellion, they made a chilling decision. They would launch their nuclear weapons at Taiwan and US, targeting both the homelands. The world held its breath as the missiles soared through the sky. US responded in kind, launching their own arsenal of nuclear weapons. Even the thought of it sends shivers down our spine. We can't deny that it's a very possible scenario, even if it's the one we desperately hope to avoid. As the sun sets on desolate wasteland, we are left with chilling reality of what could happen if we don't take action. But it's not all doom and gloom. We still have a chance to prepare for the worst and come out on the other side, even if all this happens. If you want to learn more about how to survive in a post-apocalyptic world, be sure to subscribe to my channel. In the upcoming video, I'll share tips and strategies for staying alive when everything around you has crumbled. Together, we can face the future with confidence and strength. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.